Hi, and welcome back to the Talking Cars podcast. I'm Alex Nizick.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Steve Ellick.
All right, so today we are going to be talking about the 2025 CR Automotive Brand Report Card and all of the data and results and brand rankings that we're going to dive deep into in this episode. It's all live on cr.org right now. You can go check it out. A lot of awesome new information about cars and the brands and everything there. So please go to cr.org for that. And so, we're really going to be focusing on how all of our new survey data that we got and how all of our testing basically impacts the ranking of all of these brands in different ways, right? And doing it a little differently this year and a little bit different timing. But the point here is really that with all of our new survey data, reliability is one of the most important things that we do here at CR, and it impacts these brands greatly. And there's some shifts among the brands that we're going to talk about, some of them pretty big, right? And some pretty interesting findings about vehicles along the way. So before we get there, Jake, if you can talk to us a little bit about kind of, where this data comes from that we're going to be talking about. And also if you could define reliability and what it even means to us here at CR, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So like you said, it's one of the important things that we do here. The reason we do it and is important is because it's important to consumers, and what's interesting is there's so much information out there on cars, right? I mean, you go and you throw a key into the internet and it's like all this car information, but it's mostly about how the cars drive. It's not about like things like that we kind of dig into, like safety and reliability, which incidentally are things that are really, really important to consumers. So we ask all the time, what are the more important? They want a car that's going to hold up. And even if you're under warranty, you don't want to be bringing it back to the dealer and getting this fixed and that fixed. So how do we do that? And what is reliability? So reliability is about, does it stop working? Do things break? It's really that simple. And there's lots of different measures. There's quality. People talk about that.
Sure.
It's not about like, how do you like the ride, or how do you like the cup holder? Does it fit right or whatever?
Yeah.
That could be a quality thing. We're really talking about, does it continue to work the way it's supposed to? Do things break? Do things need to get repaired?
Unexpected issues that, yeah.
Exactly. And the way we do that is from survey. So we have a survey of hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and we go through that. And I should say it's Steve, you've been very busy lately.
Yeah.
Kind of combing through that to not just talk about the brands, but at the individual make, model level and year level of which one of the vehicles are going to be more reliable and least reliable.
Right. And yeah, it is a very unique thing that we do, and something that we're in the position to do better than really anybody else. But we also then do have the road test results where we are buying and testing these cars too, right? So we can kind of offer this full picture, right? And that's where with this brand report card, not only are we talking about how these brands rank and these models rank with reliability, but also how they do in our road tests or overall, right? Some of the items that are included here. But Steven, if you can talk to us about, okay, so Jake kind of told us about the survey, how we get this. What do you do with the data when we get it, and how does that influence everything?
Yeah, so really the biggest question, the most important question for reliability in our survey is we ask our members, what problems have you had in the last 12 months? And we ask them to tell them what components they experience issues with. So this could be anything from they heard a noise or a rattling, or it could be a complete engine rebuild. And then we take all that level, or all that information at the vehicle level and calculate problem rates. So we calculate a problem rate for, say, a 2023 Subaru Forester. What issues were there with that vehicle? And then we compare it against other 2023 vehicles to say, is this above average reliability, below average, or average reliability? So I don't want to get too technical here. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I could take up this entire time talking about it.
It's very easy to get into the weeds. And I hope you've had an opportunity to sleep like in the last few weeks, because you've been running hard. But one thing I'll say about problem rate, and again, really get into the weeds, but people talk about like problems rate, problems per 100, and we are a little different in that. We're not looking at every problem the same. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the beauty of it, is like going back to that first example, is hearing a noise or a rattle is not as as severe as having to have your engine replaced. So an engine replacement is weighted way more than a noise or a leak or a problem with the in-car electronics. So if your display screen freezes, this could sometimes easily be remediated by turning your car off and back on or a software update.
Yeah.
It's weighed a lot less than an engine problem or a transmission problem when we calculate this overall weighted overall problem rate.
And I think that's so important because, it's very easy to look at a reliability data and say, well, there's a quality measure over here. And if that quality measure is looking at problems per 100 and literally weighting like the cup holder didn't fit my cup, the same as a transmission blew. It's going to be a different measure. It's not to say that it's not a good measure of something, but it's not what we're talking about.
Yes, it's not something breaking.
Right. Where do you draw that line of what is an actual problem? Right.
Correct.
I like to think about it is also, what's going to leave me kind of stranded with the car or be super inconvenient because if I need to have the engine replaced, that's a long time at the dealer or in the shop or something as opposed to like an OTA update or something like that.
Exactly.
Right. And we've also
over the air update or something like that. And you don't have to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had to add a lot of things over time too, right? Like to adjust for the market. We got EVs and hybrids and plug-in hybrids and such now that have maybe different problems, right? Compared to traditional gas cars.
Right. Yeah.
We're quantifying all those.
Exactly.
pieces.
And I do want to add one more component. So to calculate new car predicted reliability, we take the last 3 model years of a model if there's enough data on them, unless they have had a redesign during that time. And that's how we predict what a 2025 model is going to look like. Is taking that data from the past couple of years.
Right. And then, of course, along with this moment in our survey data, we have owner satisfaction, maintenance and repair. We'll dig into some of that too, but reliability is just so important. We know it from talking to consumers, doing surveys. It's always at the top of the list for what people care about, right? Okay, so before we're going to dive deep into some of the really exciting and cool findings that we found, but Jake, our website. There's some changes, right, along with this moment that you can go see right now.
Talk
us through that.
Well, first of all, we're putting out all these lists right now, so you could go and actually, even if you're not a member, you could see the brands. You could see the brands that are highest satisfaction, best, most reliable, also most reliable for used cars, highest cost of ownership, all that stuff. So please go take a look. Also, we launched these new brand pages. So these are all, our digital group has been burning the midnight oil for that.
For sure.
And so now if you go and you look at the brand, you could see how this brand actually ranks in all these different measures and take a look, take a look at the rest of the brands.
Yeah, awesome.
And a whole bunch more cool functionality there.
Yeah, it's always improving, getting better, easier to use. So absolutely. All right. So there's been some findings and some
Who's
big
moving
shuffles.
and shaking?
There's been some shaking up.
Help us out here.
Best new brand overall is Subaru. And that means it took the crown from Toyota and Lexus in reliability. Subaru is the most reliable brand this year, which is truly incredible. That's, Toyota and Lexus usually hold that crown. We always say conservative redesigns like evolution rather than revolution when a automaker redesigns a car is best.
Right.
And Toyota and Lexus had pretty much always historically done that. Slight incremental changes. The new Camry came out in the past. It wasn't that much different than the old one. Toyota and Lexus have a pretty new lineup, some new motors in there, new infotainment. Subaru has not really gone and done that. They redesigned the Forester, and it's very similar to the old Forester. You can barely tell it apart.
Maybe a refresh.
Exactly.
Depending on who you ask.
So they've continued that. And it's really done very well for them because they're not reinventing the wheel every time they redesign a car, and it maintains their reliability.
Right.
Another example of an automaker who has historically had conservative redesigns is Mazda. Mazda just came out with a brand new, ground up, fully new CX-90. They needed to nail this one. This is a mid-size 3-row SUV, which is, a pretty sought after category. And from a reliability perspective, it did not perform well in its first year. So, they had a new motor, an inline 6 turbo, as well as some
whole new
plug-in
platform.
hybrid variants, whole new platform, rear wheel drive bias, new transmission. And
everything all new.
Everything
right?
all new, and it's
Recipe for
unreliable.
trouble.
We're seeing issues with it.
Well, what's interesting is Subaru, a few years ago when they introduced the Ascent, we saw issues with that too.
Yes.
It just seems like right now, Subaru is a kind of the sweet spot where they're like, we like our lineup.
Yeah.
All we need to do is some minor tweaks to it. And if you look at some of the older Subarus, that generation wasn't really the best. I mean, we also got the used car reliability, right?
Exactly. Right. So the used car rankings, Subaru may be a little different years down the line, but this is new car reliability, and Subaru for the last 3 years, Subaru's the most reliable.
They're in a good spot right now.
3 years of data for new car reliability.
For new cars.
And that's why they are best brand overall too. I mean, reliability helps them immensely in that, but they also, it's not just reliability for Subaru that's helping them.
So reliability, they're top. And then we do the overall when we incorporate road tests and satisfaction and safety and all that kind of stuff and throw that into a big bin. And they're up top too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'll be interested to see just, how long Subaru can kind of hold on in this way, right? And maybe for a long period of time, and what I'm thinking about is Toyota kind of held on with their product lines and making those incremental changes for as long as they could. But eventually it's like, okay, we've got a bunch of V6s and V8s and whatnot. And there's emissions regulations and all sorts of things where you eventually have to make those changes, right? And so now we're seeing smaller downsized engines, new technologies and whatnot. So I don't know, would you expect Toyota to kind of improve on some of these technologies over time, or maybe eventually Subaru is going to have to do a wholesale kind of rewrite?
From what we've seen in the past from Toyota and Lexus is that even when they do introduce something new, after a couple of years, they work out the kinks and they tend to be more reliable. I don't want to say they will be the most reliable brand in 5 years, but there's a strong chance that they probably will be if they work out the kinks.
Well, we'll come back in 5 years and clip what you just said and see if it's true or not.
Exactly. So I think there is some issue with the Highlander redesign well back a couple years ago when
it's not like they haven't made
automatic.
Right. It's not like they haven't had issues in the past.
Exactly.
Right.
But a couple years later they worked out the kinks with that transmission. They were back on top.
Right. So, right. Absolutely. So when we were talking about this and we were thinking about the whole conservative redesign approach that some of these brands are taking versus maybe the opposite, does that result in a vehicle that is, not as good to drive, or you're not getting the latest and greatest technology or features or whatnot, right? Other brands are doing that. Does that mean, in this case, we'll use Subaru, keep going down that path?
Sure.
Are those vehicles like less exciting to drive, or are they not as good? Like they're putting too much into the reliability cards and therefore they suffer somewhere else. Does that make sense? And then is that even true? And I think we have some lists that maybe.
Well, I mean, I think it really depends on that brand and where they are.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of cars, it's really interesting too, because if you look at a lot of the features, it used to be always like the luxury brands would have these features, and then you get like the normal non-luxury brands and they'd have less stuff. We're at a point now that it doesn't matter if it's a luxury brand or not a luxury brand, they all have the same features.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of difference. And sometimes those new features are things that aren't even things you want.
Right.
So, I mean,
just padding the spec sheet.
Right. So, I mean, you look at like a 5-year-old, lineup of Subarus and they drive really nice and there's a lot of really good things about them. Yeah. So if they hold on to what works and just kind of make a few tweaks, they still have a good product.
Yeah. Their current platform has amazing visibility. The ride quality on most of these models is really good. I mean,
don't
fuel economy.
Don't fix what has been broken.
Right.
Stay the course.
Yeah.
So, so interesting to think about. And I think, when you look at our list for, how these brands did when it looks at our road tests specifically, right? You'll see where Subaru falls amongst the other brands as well. So you can check that out. All right. So one of the other things that we dove into and we did last year as well and did a little comparison is reliability by powertrain type, right?
Yeah.
Just regular gas-powered models compared to hybrids, plug-in hybrids, EVs. So Steve, walk us through kind of, what you found and also how maybe it compares to last year.
Yeah. So, most interestingly, we have the most electrified vehicle sample this year than before for the last 3 model years. So that means we have the most plug-in hybrid data, EV data, and hybrid data. Even though internal combustion has dropped a little bit, it seems like all the electrified sample has increased. And regarding reliability for EVs and plug-in hybrids, they are still more problematic than internal combustion gas cars, as we saw last year. But that gap has been cut in half. So plug-in hybrids are only half as problematic as they were last year, more than gas cars. It's a little complicated but they're getting better, is what I'm trying to say. Is they're improving, they're working out the kinks. Plug-in hybrids are improving, EVs are improving, and hybrids, they're almost so widespread at this point. They're about even in terms of what number of problems they have compared to gas cars.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and as there's more of these models on the market to begin with, right, there's more competition and more incentive to make them better, and just that technology ages and matures over time, right? Super cool. Yeah, consider that if you're looking at maybe some of these other powertrain options.
And I think it's worthwhile to talk about, like, why are there still more problems with plug-in hybrids and why there's more problems with EVs. I mean, the plug-in hybrids, okay, got it. You got multiple powertrains, right? More issues.
You're carrying around two at the same time.
Right, exactly. You could have, a spark plug issue and a transmission issue and an EV motor issue and a charging issue.
Right.
Got it. But the EVs are probably a little more surprising because there are less moving parts and they seem a little simpler. Do you want to talk about some of the issues that we're seeing with EVs?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of issues with the EV battery, EV charging, electric motor problems, which is no surprise, but also just the power equipment, electrical accessories. A lot of EV automakers, as well as, legacy automakers that are making EVs, kind of use their EVs as like this is where we're going to throw all our new features into it. And these are just features that can go wrong. I mean, the classic example, it's been around for a while, is, the Model X has those gull wing doors. There's no reason for that, but they do break. They're problematic. Other vehicles, such as like the Model 3, that has been around for a couple years now, has been a pretty solid performer in terms of reliability. Not much goes wrong with those.
But it's still lots of technology in that.
Still,
And I think, I mean, Tesla kind of set that bar. They said, oh, it's an EV. Look what else it can do.
Exactly.
And it has nothing to do with EV. So, I mean, look, if they had a new car came out with a 2-liter, normally aspirated engine with a 4-speed automatic, but was loaded with all this technology in it, probably have some problems too.
Yeah.
And then you have like Rivian, a startup company. They never built cars before a couple years ago. And now they're building EVs. Well, you're seeing EV powertrain problems, like with the battery packs, the charging system, climate system, which is different in EVs.
Right. So would you say, some of these EVs have been on the market now for, the Teslas are one thing, but I don't know, take an Ioniq 5, right? It's been on the market for a few years, so they've had some time. Are EVs in general following the trend that we're used to seeing where, there's some problems at first, but the technology ages, it gets better over time? With the EV technology specifically, the batteries, the motors, these things?
In general, you do see an improvement. Each EV has a story of its own. Like you bring up the Ioniq 5, that's actually an example which hasn't aged well. They have
I picked a real good one.
But
I like that
and the EV6 is kind of following along because it's some similar components there. But there are other examples out there, like the Mustang Mach-E. It continues to be reliable. They had issues when it was first released, and they've worked those out. And for the past couple of years, they've been average reliability. As a whole, we're seeing these kinks be worked out, and EVs be more mainstream and have less issues with them.
Okay. Great. And so the last thing I want to talk about, and we touched on it really briefly, but maybe we can expand a little bit, is just the difference between new car predicted reliability and then used car reliability. And yes, we did talk about it, but you'll see, and it's included in this moment that we're talking about, right? This brand report card. You'll see how the brand ranks with new car reliability and also used car. And sometimes they're similar, right? As the cars age, still reliable. Other times there are bigger swings depending on new versus used. So, Jake, maybe you can start by explaining just why we see some of these differences.
Sure.
And then Stephen, maybe some of those notable differences.
Sure. Yeah. You're right. One is looking at the new car product line. That's the cars are on sale right now. And the other is kind of looking at the fleet from that brand that are 5 to 10 years old. And the truth is that they're different vehicles. So for the most part, they're different generations of vehicles. Sometimes the manufacturer has made different decisions. Maybe they want to get more into tech. Maybe they don't want to make a bunch of changes. And we see some differences there. So you look at, Toyota. When you look at the older vehicles, they are just in a class of their own.
Rock solid.
They're rock solid. They are so much ahead of anybody else. You look at right now, it's like, yes, we're seeing Subaru has kind of just outpointed Toyota right now because Toyota happens to go and this year they've added a few new technologies and things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 5 to 10 years and how those vehicles age. But the truth is a lot of people are looking for used cars. A lot of people are looking for new cars. And we want to make sure that we can, help both of those markets out.
Makes sense. Stephen, any other brands that come to mind that maybe perform well in one or not in the other right now with our latest data?
Jake pretty much nailed it with Toyota. They're rock solid when they're used. Subaru, a couple years ago, if you buy that used Subaru, it may not be as reliable as if you're buying a new one for the next couple of years. But BMW has been pretty reliable in terms of their new vehicles. But it depends on, there's a different story when you look at used BMWs. And also interesting about that is we do maintenance and repair costs. Well, older BMWs are quite expensive to maintain as well. So there's another component added to that. And that's why we like doing all of these lists at the same time, because there's such a story about each brand, about each model.
And consumers, there's some people who will buy a BMW and they will lease it and they may not even know that vehicle out of warranty. And they may actually have a pretty trouble-free time with it. That's different from if I'm buying a 8-year-old BMW with 100,000 miles on it. Maybe you want to think twice. So, it's very easy for say like, here's the reliability of BMW, but it's like, again, it's like, which part of that life are you interested in that car?
Right. Where are you jumping into that vehicle's lifespan? Right. Yeah. All right. So that's going to kind of wrap up, this discussion about the CR brand report card for 2025. And again, you can find all of these lists and this amazing information that Stephen has really cranked out over these last couple of weeks on cr.org. So definitely check that out. And so we're going to move on to our questions from our viewers. And again, just as a reminder, you can head to cr.org/TalkingCars where you can submit all your questions. We love video questions in particular, but written questions are great too. And if we use one of your questions on the show, we'll even send you some swag. So definitely do that. So our first one comes from Chris from Clinton, New York, and he says, in your brand reliability rankings, it looks like the luxury brand from a company is usually higher than their mainstream counterpart. Think Acura over Honda, Lexus over Toyota, Audi over VW. But this is surprising since they're usually lower sales volume. I would have thought that the more cars manufactured, the better chance of catching issues and correcting them. Are luxury cars actually made with more expensive, better components, or is it that luxury car owners tend to maintain their cars better? Can you explain why they tend to rank higher as a brand? Jake, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. Interesting. and again, being the reliability historian, looking back, it used to be actually luxury cars were far less reliable because, like I was talking before, is they were the ones loaded with all the power equipment. The mainstream one didn't have power seats and power windows and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
Today it's different, but in terms of high volume, meaning reliability, not so much. I mean, the F-150, they make a lot of those.
Sure.
They're still having issues with it. They make a whole lot of Silverados.
Yeah, maybe margins are more at play there. I don't know.
Well, margins are a thing. I mean, and that is another question. Is it because of the margin? There's better components going into the luxury cars? I don't think so. I think when you go and you see sometimes where the luxury automaker, luxury version, I think often, actually, they're very similar. But one thing I will say is that sometimes what they do is, and we keep on saying getting the bugs out, right? So very often the luxury vehicle comes later on a new platform. So sometimes you see the new platform comes on the mainstream one, and then the Toyota comes out, and then the Lexus comes out. The Volkswagen's got the new platform, and then the Audi gets it. So because some of those luxury automakers have kind of older platforms, they're benefiting from it because of that.
Right. Okay, awesome. So our second question comes from Robert, and he says, are CR reliability ratings useful for older vehicles? I expect a vehicle with low miles driven would be much more reliable than the same age vehicle with high miles driven, but there is no distinction for miles driven in CR reliability ratings. In my opinion, not accounting for miles driven makes CR reliability ratings less useful for older vehicles. For example, the 2016 Odyssey was recommended a couple years ago, but is no longer recommended. The 2017 Odyssey is recommended now. Are there actually improvements in the 2017 model that make it more reliable? Or is it the same as 2016, but with more miles driven on average, and that is the reason it is less reliable now? Would you consider providing more detail behind the CR ratings, such as problem frequency by miles driven and model?
See, this is the problem with the reliability information. We're not detailed enough here. We need to actually
You hear that, Steve?
submit a spreadsheet and like open up all the data.
Let everybody download everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are actually really good questions. I mean, in terms of the specific vehicle, it is very possible that some vehicles age differently. So, you know, again, we're talking about Toyotas and they're like, okay, here's the problem rate. It kind of stays the same. They like flatline over there. You get something like the Odyssey, you get a certain age and certain mileage, as Robert points out, that now you're having transmission problems that you didn't have at lower mileage. So, I mean, we do look at the mileage when we're doing the analysis and certainly, you know, consider all those things. But I think the broader issue is that, you know, if you're looking at a 2017 Odyssey and you're buying a used car and one's got 30,000 miles on it and one's got 180,000 miles, they're not going to be the same level of reliability for you. So that is really critical when you're shopping for those vehicles.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I love the mile idea. We've talked about it before to say, you know, how many problems does a vehicle have at 75,000 miles, and how can you compare one model to another if you normalize them to 75,000 miles?
Right.
Just something that I would love to do.
What is the exact mile that the transmission will fail? I want to know exactly when.
I would love to have some
Get a
information
little
like
alert
that.
notification. Sell the car now.
Yeah. Or it's, you know, everything's been replaced at 150,000 miles, so you're free for another 50,000.
Isn't AI going to do that for us?
Yeah.
We'll pretend to.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Odyssey example, yeah, it really goes back to how vehicles age and how we present our reliability results. I mean, when we present a 2017 Honda Odyssey is, I'm just making it up, you know, above average reliability. That means it's above average for other 2017 models.
Yeah.
So maybe in this survey year, the 2017 is above average, but then next year, it will be below average. It may actually have, you know, the same amount of problems as it did last year, but the peers, the everybody else in the model year, the other 2017s have aged better than the Honda Odyssey. So it's easier to compare 2017 models across the board to each other versus compare and say, oh, the 2016 will have more problems than a 2017.
Right. And it's also chances, right? And this is all statistics. This is all your chance. So before, we were talking about just before, you know, before you say like, my Jeep Wrangler has got 180,000 miles and hasn't had a problem, or my Corolla has been in the shop, you know what? All that's possible. We're just talking about on average, which cars are going to be more or less likely to have problems.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And you're trying to set yourself up to have the best chance of having a reliable car. So
correct.
Right. So looking at the brand list, for example, and choosing from a brand that ranks higher, maybe it's not number one, but you know, somewhere towards the top, right? And then digging down further on our site at the model level to then choose a model that's reliable within that reliable brand, right? Just to up your chances of having the most reliable experience, right? Overall. So I think that's maybe how Robert and others can use the list right to their advantage. All right, so our last question, I'm pretty excited for this one. Matthew from Moon Township, Pennsylvania. Do you guys miss any features from older vehicles that they don't have in new cars, like ashtrays or vent windows, for example? Yeah, I think we all have the same like base answer, but we might need to go expand from there. Steve, Steve, I'll start with you. What's that basic answer?
We haven't talked about this beforehand, but we have a really strong idea that we're going to be
because I would love a manual transmission. I miss manual transmissions.
Right. Just more manual options, right?
Yes.
And yeah, for sure. Jake.
Well, it's so funny, like unprompted. Matthew's been looking in my head because I was just talking to I don't know if you were part of this, but I basically put everyone on a mission. It's like, what car can you buy now under 25 grand?
A new car.
Yep. With a manual transmission.
Right. And
whoa. Should we just like put it out to the audience?
Yeah, take a few minutes.
Take a few minutes. I want to buy a new car with a manual transmission under 25 because it used to be everything. All the small cars were available. That was you could get that. And it's like, take a look around.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
There's one answer in 2025 anyway.
There's one answer.
It is the base model Nissan Sentra.
Right. Which
Nope. I keep doing that.
Not
it's
the
the
Sentra.
Versa.
Sentra can't get it.
Nope, not the Sentra. I take it back. It's the Versa.
I'm not sure if you could get CarPlay or even a fold-down rear seat on that version. Steel wheels. 15s.
Yep.
And it's a 5-speed.
And it's a 5-speed. It's not even a 6-speed.
Which is funny because about nearly 20 years ago, they had a 6-speed in the Versa.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. And it was like $18,000 or something like that. But yeah, good luck finding one. I think you said you found one
I did
or something.
Find one. I'm going to go buy it after this.
Yeah, that'll be the only one. So anybody else interested, you're out
If you
of
can
luck.
find another one, let us know.
All right. So I was trying to think of things beyond that because, of course, we're all going to say manual transmissions and naturally aspirated engines and whatnot. And at first I was thinking, is lightness and simplicity a feature? Because I would like that to come back, right? Just like smaller, lighter vehicles that aren't so... we just got out of the Silverado EV, for example, and it's amazing in its own way, but...
Not simple or light.
It's not either of those things.
It changes the gravitational force.
Right.
When you're in it.
Right. Some other fun ones that came to mind were... And actually, at first it was easier for me to think of things that I wish new cars didn't have, but runner-up for me was like pop-up headlights.
Oh my God, yeah.
I love pop-up headlights. Terrible idea.
So I'm not getting the Versa. I'm going to get a 87 MR2 that I saw pop up in the listing.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's going to hit every
Somebody needs to make a
box.
retrofit kit so you can just add them to whatever car you have. Do you remember the tiny windshield wipers on, I think, Volvos? Had them to clear the headlights.
Yeah, they're more popular in Europe.
Probably also a bad idea, but that was kind of cool. Spare tires. Wish that would make a comeback. But you know what? The one that really stuck out to me that I wish more cars had was a lower belt line. Like you have all of the belt line of the car that is like here at your face, and it's for crash protection. And I get it.
Early 90s Civics.
Yeah.
Like it was like the dashboard was at your knees.
Right. And I want to put my arm on the door, with the window down or whatever, and be able to drive around and do that. You can do that in older cars where so many of these newer cars, that driving position is just not the same. And I think that's a big part of it. And visibility goes along with that too. But so they don't make them like they used to, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for this episode, talking about CR's, automotive brand report card, and you can find all that information on cr.org. Also, don't forget to send us your questions, cr.org/talkingcars, and we will see you next time.